10:45 p.m., Norton Shores, Michigan, a gas station on a Friday night. Jessica Hiringa is 25 years old. She has a 3-year-old son at home. She is alone, restocking shelves inside an Exxon station, and she has been on her feet since the start of her shift. Her purse is behind the counter. Her jacket is in the back. Her car sits in the lot outside. She will not drive home tonight. In under 20 minutes, she will be gone. Not finished her shift, not stepped out, gone. The register will still be full. The lights will still be on. Behind the building, on bare concrete, there will be blood. And somewhere out on the road, a silver van will be moving. That van is the first question. The second is older and darker and harder to close. Because the man who came for her that night had been inside that station before. More than once. More than 5 times. He had watched her work. He had learned her schedule. He had made a decision long before she ever had reason to look up and feel afraid. Investigators would spend 3 years building a case against him. They would find the van. They would find the evidence. They would put him in a courtroom and walk out with a life sentence. And still, the answer that matters most has never come. Where is Jessica Hiringa? Rewind one day, Thursday, April 25th, near the end of Jessica's shift, which usually ended around 11:30 at night. A woman lingers at the counter, talking. She likes Jessica, and she is worried about her, a young woman working alone this late with nothing between her and the road. So she says it out loud. Get your boyfriend to sit with you. Don't be here by yourself at night. A man is standing nearby, a regular. He hears the whole thing, and he turns and says, Jessica has customers looking out for her too. Jessica shakes her head, and then she shivers. The woman clocks it. That is not a normal reaction to a friendly line from a familiar face. She files it away, walks out to her car, and does something small that says everything about instinct. She does not drive off. She sits and watches the store until the regular leaves, and Jessica is alone and safe. Nothing happens. The man goes. Jessica finishes her night. That was the near miss. Nobody knew it yet. And the reason it matters is the reason the whole case turns later, because the danger did not arrive as a stranger. It arrived as a face Jessica had seen before. Think about what that counter was. A young woman, alone, overnight, in a lit box of glass, with the doors unlocked to anyone who wants to walk in. No guard, no camera. A single person responsible for the register, the pumps, and her own safety at the same time. Predators who hunt a fixed location understand that math better than the people who work there. They learn the schedule. They learn who covers the late shift and who checks on her, and when the parking lot empties out. Familiarity is the tool. It is patient, and it is quiet, and it does not look like a threat until the moment it stops pretending. 24 hours later, the shield is gone. Friday, 4:30 in the afternoon, Jessica clocks in. A slow shift. Her boyfriend swings by. A friend swings by later, and the two of them stand around and talk while she works. Around 9 at night, the friend and another customer notice a silver van pull in. Jessica is outside at the pumps, and they watch her talk to whoever is driving. Friendly, laughing, even. The van rolls off. From inside the store, through the glass, nobody can make out the driver's face. Only Jessica can. One of the people in that store gave his account to reporters, and it lands harder than anything a narrator could add.
I think the general banter was like, hey, I thought you're supposed to be inside, not out here, kind of joking almost, like it was a regular kind of guy that would come in there and talk to her or whatever.
He says they acted as if they knew each other.
It seemed almost like construction worker banter. You hear about the old construction workers that would do catcalls and stuff like that. You try to hit on the pretty ladies.
He read it as a regular. A guy who came in and joked with her, who acted like he knew her, which is the thing that curdles in hindsight, because familiarity is exactly the tool that got Jessica to walk toward that van instead of away from it. Abductors who work a fixed spot rarely lunge from the shadows. They build a face first. They become the man who is always around, until the day being around turns into being alone with her. 5 to 11. A customer comes in, buys something, sees Jessica behind the counter, everything ordinary, he leaves. And then the manager, on her motorcycle, sees the silver van pull behind the store. Her first thought is not kidnapping. It is theft. That maybe Jessica is loading merchandise out the back door for someone, so she rides closer to catch it in the act. Instead, she sees a figure at the rear of the van and the hatch swinging shut, open, shut, like a man arranging something he does not want seen. A red or orange sweatshirt, wavy, wild hair. She hears no yelling, no scream. The van drives one way. She drives the other. 11:10 at night. A different customer walks in.
I just walked inside. There's nobody. There's a car here. Another car out front. But it just is very suspicious why there's nobody here.
He does the thing you would do. He calls out. He walks the building. He checks the back.
Okay, so did you yell or anything, or?
Yeah, I hollered, hey, walked around the building. It just, I don't know.
911 goes out. Police roll in and start reading the scene. And reading a scene is the whole job at this stage, because the physical facts are all they have. The scene is wrong in a way that tightens the stomach. The register is full. Jessica's purse sits where she left it. Her jacket, still there. Robbers take money. Robbers take the till and run. Nothing was taken from that store but the woman, and that single absence rewrites everything, because it means the target was never the cash. Then an officer works the back door, where that van sat for a handful of minutes, and finds the first two pieces of physical evidence in the entire case. A blot of blood, roughly 2 inches across, on the ground, and beside it, a small piece of black plastic. Not trash. The battery covered to the laser sight of a handgun. Hold on to that cover. It travels 3 years and closes a second murder before this is over. Canine units work the ground around the station in a widening pattern and find nothing to follow, no scent line, no direction of travel, no body. What police can build from the scene is thin and specific at the same time. A make and a model, a silver Chrysler Town and Country, a rough sketch of a man in a red sweatshirt with wild hair, a theory of the abduction that fits every object left behind, that someone familiar lured Jessica out the back, maybe asking for help, maybe catching her stepping out for a cigarette, struck her hard enough to open her scalp and shear the cover off his own gun sight, and folded her into a van whose back door only opens from inside. The theory is sound, and it is almost useless, because in Michigan alone, there are roughly 15,000 of those vans on the road. 15,000. A sketch and a silhouette do not narrow 15,000 down to one driveway. Helicopters go up, dogs go out, volunteers walk the fields and the tree lines, tip lines open, and the whole apparatus runs into a wall, because there is nowhere to point it. Days become weeks. The van is somewhere among 15,000 identical vans, and the man is a sketch, and Jessica is nowhere. The trail goes cold, and cold cases do not stay warm on effort alone. They wait for the offender to make a mistake. Act 2 escalation. More than a year passes with no answer. And then, 20 minutes down the road, the case gets a second victim it does not yet know is connected. June 29th, 2014. Just after 6 in the evening, on Automobile Road, neighbors find a woman down in the middle of the pavement. She still has a weak pulse. Their first read, the human read, is a hit and run.
911, where is your emergency?
We come up to this lady. She's laying in the road. I think she was hit by a car. She's
Okay.
got a head injury.
Rebecca Bletch, 36 years old, out for a run near her own home, in daylight, on a road she had run before. When investigators reach her, the story changes shape under their hands. No car did this. She was shot 3 times in the back of the head. 3 small casings lie near her body, .22 caliber. Her wrists, her hands, her back, her leg carry bruises that nobody can fully explain, marks that suggest she did not go quietly. She dies a short time later. Investigators do the patient thing at a homicide scene. They photograph the casings in place, they bag them, they preserve the geometry of where a body fell and where the brass landed, because a casing carries the fingerprint of the gun that fired it. The microscopic scratches a barrel and a firing pin leave on metal. That evidence goes into storage and waits, useless until there is a gun to compare it against. And there is no gun, no robbery, no obvious motive, no witness who saw the shooter. A woman is executed on a road in the evening light, and the road keeps its secret. The theory that hardens is the worst kind, the random one, a killer with no reason and no thread you can pull, because the thing that usually solves a murder is the relationship between victim and killer, and here there appears to be none. 2 cases now sit cold in the same corner of Michigan, 20 minutes apart. A woman taken from behind a gas station, a woman shot on a jog. Nobody links them. There is no reason yet to link them. No shared name, no shared face, no shared witness. And that is the quiet horror of these months, because the same man is carrying the same gun between both scenes, driving the same roads, and no one on the outside knows he is one person instead of two coincidences. The uncomfortable truth about cases like these is how they tend to break. Not through a lab breakthrough on the original evidence, not through a tip that finally pans out. They break when the offender reaches for someone else and misses when the appetite that drove the first crimes drives one more and the last one goes wrong. The very thing that makes a predator dangerous, that he will not stop, is the thing that eventually hands him over. He just has to fail once, in front of the right survivor. Then comes April 2016, close to 3 years after Jessica, close to 2 years after Rebecca, and the break, when it finally comes, does not come from a task force or a lab. It comes from a 16-year-old girl walking home from a party in the dark. She gets lost. A man in a silver van pulls up and asks if she needs a ride. She says no, which is the right answer, the answer every child is taught. But she is lost, and her own phone is no help, so she asks to borrow his to call for a ride, and she climbs in to make the call. That small yes is all he needed. He hits the gas. The van lurches down the road, and a gun comes out, and every instinct in her body picks the one option that keeps her alive. She jumps out of a moving van onto the road, and she is up and running before he can turn the vehicle around. He speeds off. She reaches a house, pounds on the door, and the people inside call police. This is the crack in the wall, and detectives know how to widen a crack. She saw his face, and she saw his van, and this time the neighborhood has cameras. Investigators canvass, pull surveillance from nearby properties and businesses, and stitch the vehicle's path together frame by frame until they have it clean. A silver Chrysler Town and Country, the same make, the same model that had vanished into 15,000 others 3 years before. Only now it has a plate and a registered owner, and the girl who got away picks him out of a lineup without hesitation. His name is Jeffrey Willis. And the thing about Jeffrey Willis, the thing that turns a single attempted kidnapping into something far larger, is what was riding in that van with him. Act 3 Crisis. Search warrants come fast, because a lineup identification and a matching vehicle give a judge everything needed to sign. Police open up the van and the home, and what they pull out of the van reads like a kit assembled for one purpose. A search of a vehicle is slow and total. Officers photograph before they touch, log where each item sat, and treat the van as a container of small decisions its owner made about what to keep within reach. What they logged reads like a kit: syringes loaded with a sedative, handcuffs, wire restraints, rope, a gag. Not one item that could pass as innocent, but a set. The tools a person carries when the plan is to take someone, hold them, and keep them from getting away. A man does not assemble that by accident and drive it around for the errand of a normal life. This was not someone who cracked one night. This was a man who drove ready, day after day, waiting for the door to open. And in the van, a handgun, .22 caliber. Now the patient evidence from Automobile Road finally has something to answer to. Ballistics takes that handgun to the lab and test fires it, then compares the marks on the fired casings to the 3 casings preserved beside Rebecca Bletch. They match. The random killing was never random. It was him. But the detail that stops the breath is smaller than a coin. The laser sight mounted on that handgun is missing its battery cover. The exact piece of black plastic officers had lifted off the ground behind the Exxon, next to Jessica's blood, 3 years and 1 season earlier. Follow the single object. One small black cover snapped off a gun sight in a struggle behind a gas station in 2013, sitting in an evidence bag for years. One handgun, pulled from a van in 2016, its sight scarred where that cover should be, its barrel matched to a murder in 2014. One gun, 2 crime scenes, 2 women. The cold cases fuse into one man across a single afternoon of lab work, and the fusion is airtight, because physical evidence does not change its story on the stand. Then they get into the house, and it gets worse. Digital examiners do not simply switch on a suspect's computer and scroll. They image the drives, make exact copies, and work the copies so nothing is altered and nothing a defense can challenge. Then they go through what a person tried to keep and what a person tried to erase, because deleted rarely means gone. On his home computer sat child sexual abuse material, along with videos of women being bound and taken, some staged, some not. That is as far as the decent thing lets a narrator go. and it is far enough to know what kind of man they were dealing with. On a hard drive, a folder he had named himself. Inside were 2 more folders, and their labels are "What Break Your Composure," because they are initials. One reads for Rebecca Sue Bletch. One reads for Jessica Lynn Hieringa. Inside each, photographs of the woman it was named for, saved next to the news reports about her own disappearance and death. He kept them. He collected the coverage of what he had done and filed it under their names, the way another person keeps ticket stubs. Investigators who work these cases have a word for that behavior, and it is not sentiment. It is trophy keeping, the offender reliving the act through the objects and the coverage, and it is the mark of someone who does not intend to stop. One of his passwords made the same point in miniature. It was built from Jessica's initials and the date, the day after she vanished. He carried her into the login of his own accounts. A little more about the man, because the warning signs had a paper trail long before 2 women died. Jeffrey Willis had once worked as a janitor at an elementary school. The principal noticed he was spending long stretches in the computer lab, and after he had used one of the machines, staff checked its history, and what they found got him walked out the door. The signal was there, on a school's own computer, years early. Nobody connected it to anything because there was nothing yet to connect it to. That is how these men so often live before the day they are caught, inside jobs and families and neighborhoods, generating small alarms that never add up because no single person sees them all at once. The charges stack. First, the kidnapping and assault of the 16-year-old, the crime that opened the door, then the murder of Rebecca Bletch, carried by the gun, and in September 2016, the one that had haunted the town for 3 years, the kidnapping and murder of Jessica Hieringa. The coverage that day called it a bittersweet moment for her family, a real step on the road to justice that still left them without their daughter, their mother, their sister, a void an arrest was never going to fill. They finally had a name. They still did not have her. And then the case grows a second man. A month after the arrest, police pick up Willis's cousin, Kevin Bloom, a corrections officer with the state, a man whose whole job was the machinery of custody and confinement. Bloom cannot keep his story straight and cannot keep his mouth shut, which in an interrogation room is its own kind of tell. He tells police his cousin killed Jessica and that he himself helped move the body. He describes the day after she vanished, being called over, being told there was a woman in a party, arriving to find Jessica on the floor unconscious, a wound to her head. He says the 2 of them wrapped her and buried her. And then, in the same breath, he takes it all back, says he made the whole thing up. An overactive imagination, he tells them, as if a man invents a burial by accident. But here is what does not wash out, and it is the piece that separates a fantasist from a participant. Bloom knew things about the Rebecca Bletch scene that were never released to the public. Investigators hold certain details back for exactly this reason. Facts only the killer and the police could know, so that any confession can be tested against them. Bloom had those facts. You do not guess, hold back details. You have them because you were near the crime. Police charged him with lying to them twice, and under that weight, he stopped dancing. He pled no contest to being an accessory after the fact for helping dispose of Jessica's body, a charge that sits a universe below murder in the eyes of the law, and he walked with time served, probation, and a tracker on his ankle for a year. He is already out. The man who described burying her is a free man walking around, and that gap between what he admitted and what he served is a thing the family has to carry every single day. Act 4 resolution. The trials come in order, and the order itself tells you something about evidence. Rebecca Bletch goes first, because her case has the gun. The gun makes it almost mechanical. The casings from the road, the handgun from his van, the marks that match, the missing cover that ties the same weapon back to Jessica. Prosecutors lay out what happened on that jog. He pulled alongside her, tried to take her, and when she fought him off, when the bruises on her wrists and hands were being made, he killed her for refusing. She died because she resisted a stranger, which is to say, she did everything right and it still cost her everything. The jury convicts. In Michigan, a first-degree murder conviction carries 1 sentence and only one: life in prison with no chance of parole, no discretion left to the judge, and Jeffrey Willis receives it before Jessica's case even reaches a courtroom. Then May 2018, and Jessica Hieringa finally gets her trial. Her case is harder, and the difficulty has a name in the law. Prosecuting a murder with no body is one of the steepest climbs a state can attempt, because the defense gets to stand up and ask the oldest question there is. Where is she? Prove she is even dead. For most of legal history, no corpse meant no case, on the reasoning that a missing person might simply be missing. That standard has softened, but the burden it leaves behind is real. To convict, the prosecution has to make a jury certain of a death it cannot show them, out of everything that surrounds the death instead of the death itself. So, they build it the other way, out of 100 small, true things stacked into a wall. He had been to that Exxon 15 times before the night he took her. 15. He was not a stranger who wandered in once. He was the familiar face, the regular, the man the customers assumed belonged there. And when investigators finally looked hard at the man who unsettled Jessica the night before she vanished, the one who said customers were looking out for her, the one who made her shiver, it was Jeffrey Willis. He was in the store that Friday too, alone with her. His alibi did not survive contact with his own phone. He told police he was home that night, but a phone leaves a trail whether its owner wants it to or not, pinging the towers nearest to it, and those pings can be laid over a map to sketch where a person moved and roughly when. His records placed him near his grandfather's house, 7 minutes from the gas station, and near the Exxon itself, in the hours before she disappeared. A phone does not lie about which towers it reached for, and has reached for the ones by the crime while his mouth said he was home. The 15 visits do their own quiet work in that light. One trip to a gas station is nothing. 15, from a man who lived his life elsewhere, is a pattern, the shape of someone learning a place and a person until he knew exactly when she would be alone. His factory job expected him that night, and he never showed, and did not show in the days that followed either. The prosecution's theory, built from the records and the geography, was direct. He took Jessica from the station around 11 at night, brought her to his grandfather's house, assaulted her, and killed her. And there was the shovel. During the original search, an anonymous tip sent police to a wooded area near a cabin, and they came up empty. Days later, a neighbor watched Jeffrey Willis show up at that same ground with a shovel. A man does not dig where the police just looked, unless he knows what the police were looking for. The defense had one job, the honest job of any defense, to find the doubt and hold it up to the jury.
No one has ever seen him alone with Miss Harrington. No one's ever seen him assault Miss Harrington. No one's ever seen him drug Miss Harrington. He will be, I believe you will have information that paints him as an evil person, and that may be your judgment. But you will not have evidence that he killed or kidnapped Miss Harrington. And we think, in the end, as we remind you of your oath, when you decide this particular matter, is the fact that you don't have anything. There is no there. That you don't have the evidence that you need, whether it's CSI or other sources. You don't have the evidence you need to convict my client of the case for which he's actually been charged this morning.
The counter to that argument was a single light at the back of the store, the one over the spot where the van had parked. The manager who watched the van that night testified the light was off, that it was dark as anything back there. But that light can only be switched on from inside the store. And when the first citizen reached the scene, and when the first officer arrived minutes later, that back light was burning. 2 witnesses, Susan Fallot and Eric Barber, agreed it was off when the van left. 2 more, the first citizen on the scene, Craig Harvester, and the first officer to arrive, Corporal Hoeksema, testified it was on when they got there. In the few minutes between the van leaving and help arriving, someone reached inside a store with a missing clerk and turned that light on. A dead woman does not flip a switch. Whoever flipped it had the run of that store and the nerve to walk back into it. The defense had its own frame for the whole thing and laid it out plainly.
The evidence showed that the eyewitness, Susan Follett, when asked, didn't recognize me as the driver of the van, and she testified she remembers every face that comes into the store. Both her and her ex-husband, Eric Barber, agreed that the light in the back of the store was off when the van left. But both Craig Harvester, the first citizen on the scene, and Corporal Hoeksema, the first officer to arrive, both testified that this light that can only be turned on from inside the Exxon station was on when they arrived. In that few minutes of time between the van leaving and Harpster's arrival, someone else had to have turned this light back on. The maxim, Occam's razor, which states, in explaining something, no more assumptions should be made than what is necessary, comes to mind here. It seems blatantly obvious to me that this town and country van the police so adamantly searched for had absolutely nothing to do with Miss Harrington's disappearance, and was all just a prosecutorial red herring. I too fell into this group of fantasy thinkers, believing the police could be trusted with not fucking up an investigation.
They argued the eyewitness could not place him at the wheel, that 15,000 of those vans meant the one behind the station could belong to anyone, that the gas station he haunted was simply on his route to work, that the real van and the real killer belonged to someone else entirely. It is the argument you make when the physical evidence points one direction and you need 12 people to look the other way. And then the room went still and waited on that jury to weigh a wall of small true things against a story about somebody else's van. The charge itself left room for the jury to decide how far it went. Open murder, in Michigan, hands the degree to the 12 of them, and the prosecution had pled 2 roads to the same place: premeditated murder, a killing planned in advance, and felony murder, a killing committed in the course of another felony, here the kidnapping. Either road, on its own, is murder in the first degree. The jury did not have to agree on the man's exact thoughts, only that he took her and she died in the taking.
Count 1, open murder, guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty of first-degree premeditated and first-degree felony murder. Count 2, kidnapping, guilty.
Okay, thank you. You may be seated.
After roughly an hour and a half, they returned. Guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. Guilty of first-degree felony murder. Guilty of kidnapping. May 16th, 2018. A second life sentence. No parole. Mandatory and absolute. For a woman whose family still had no place to lay her. Closing. At sentencing, Jeffrey Willis asked to speak, and the court let him, because the law lets the convicted speak even when everyone in the room already knows what he is.
I am innocent. I stand before you today proof that the promise of Gideon is dead. Not only did the justice system for indigent defense fail here, but the promise of equal protection and due process as well. Our system of government relies on many principles. 2 of these are a belief that everyone deserves justice equally and that money shouldn't be part of that equation, but also a fair and balanced approach to that justice is consistent with the fundamental principles of liberty which lie at the base of all of our civil and political institutions. These trials were just an exercise in feudalistic justice. Catch them, flog them, imprison them.
No confession, no account of where she is. A man convicted of taking 2 women turned his last chance to say anything into a lecture about his own treatment, about the failures of a system that had just held him accountable. He gave the families nothing, which was, by then, the only thing left in his power to give or withhold. And the prosecutor, who had carried these families for years, answered him in the plainest terms.
Quite honestly, Judge, in my career, and I've been doing this now almost 19 years, this man is probably one of the most dangerous men that I hope to ever encounter in my career. He shows no remorse, no lack, no ounce of dignity or integrity. And it's clear that the justice system has the right place for him, and that's behind bars for the rest of his natural life. It goes to show that we have successfully locked up an individual who, had he not been caught and captured, would have continued his killing in this particular community. So with that, Judge, I'm going to sleep very well tonight, knowing that Mr. Wilson never see the light of day again. Thank you.
Sit for a second with the arithmetic of how close this came to never happening. Jessica's station had no cameras, so there was no face to run. The van was one of 15,000, so there was no plate to trace. Rebecca's murder looked random for 2 years, so there was no thread to Jessica. Every ordinary path that should have caught him slipped through the fingers of good investigators doing everything right. What finally caught him was a 16-year-old girl who, with a gun already out and the road moving under her, made the decision to jump. She ran to a stranger's door and knocked, and that knock is the reason 2 families got an answer at all. Without her, the sketch stays a sketch. The van stays lost among the 15,000. He keeps driving his route to work with the gun in the console, and he does not stop, because men who keep folders in coverage do not stop on their own. Rebecca Blech was 36, and she was running near her own home on an evening like any other when he pulled up beside her. She fought a man with a gun and lost, and the fighting is the reason there were bruises to photograph and casings to keep, the reason her murder became the case that convicted him first. Even her last minutes, refusing him, did work she never got to see. Jessica Hiringa was 25, and she had a little boy who was 3 years old, and a mother and a sister, and a whole ordinary life she was standing inside of at 5 to 11 that Friday. Her son will grow up on the far side of a hole where his mother should be, old enough now to know the shape of what was taken, and too young when it happened to remember her face on his own. And after everything, the 2 convictions, the 2 life sentences, the folders with her initials, her body has never been found. 2 juries, 2 verdicts, and still no place to bring her home. That is the part that does not resolve, and no verdict was ever going to resolve it. A man is behind bars for the rest of his natural life, and it is the right place for him, and it still does not give the Hiringas the one thing they have wanted since April 2013. Justice and closure are not the same word. One of them, the courts delivered in full. The other is still out there somewhere in the woods, under a shovel, in a place only 2 men ever knew, and one of them will never say, and the other took it back. There is a harder thought underneath all of it, and it is worth saying straight. The most dangerous offenders are often not the ones who slip up early. They are the careful ones, the patient ones, the men who fit into a job and a family and a route to work, who take one person and go quiet for a year, then take another and go quiet again. Those men are rarely undone by brilliance. They are undone by luck, by a survivor who runs, by a cover that snaps off a gun sight, by a cousin who cannot hold a story together. Which forces the question no one wants to hold for long. How many are out there right now who simply have not failed yet, who have not yet pulled up beside the one person with the nerve to jump? The answer is unknowable, and that is exactly why it sits so heavy. Come back to the shiver. He was a regular. He joked with her. He was familiar. And familiarity is the exact thing that walks a person past the alarm they should have listened to. Jessica shivered the night before she was taken, and her instinct was right, and it still was not enough. Because the danger did not look like danger. It looked like a guy she had seen 15 times before, standing where he always stood. For the people who loved these 2 women, the verdicts landed as something short of relief. A guilty finding closes a legal file. It does not return a runner to the road she trained on, or a young mother to the child who was 3 when she vanished. The years between the crimes and the courtroom were their own kind of sentence, served by the families, 5 springs of not knowing for the Hiringas, of searches that turned up nothing, of a name they did not have, and then a name that changed almost nothing about the ache. 2 life terms, no parole, and a killer who kept his silence to the end and offered them a lecture instead of a location. That is what accountability looked like here. It is real, and it is not the same as being made whole, and no one who sat through those trials would pretend otherwise. Stay awake to that, all of you who work alone at a counter late at night, who walk home lost in the dark, who assume the recognizable face is the safe one. The face you have seen before is not the same as the face you know. Watch the van that has no reason to be there. Do not get in to borrow the phone. Trust the shiver, and act on it while acting is still cheap. And spare a thought for the girl who jumped, because she is the reason this story has an ending at all, and the reason 2 families ever got to hear the word guilty.